You look at the world, our cities, our markets, our institutions, and you see permanence. You see a structure that will stand the test of time. You are blind to the truth. Everything you see around you is a dissipative structure, a temporary island of order, desperately fighting against an ocean of chaos. But the ocean always wins. We are living in the terminal stage of an entropy engine, a global system that has become so complex, so interconnected, and so resource-intensive that it can no longer maintain its own existence. You aren't watching history unfold. You are watching a system lose its grip on coherence. This isn't just about economics or politics. It's about the second law of thermodynamics. Entropy is the tax that the universe levies on every action, and we have been living on credit for far too long. The engine is running hot, the fuel is running out, and the gears are grinding to a halt. You are not witnessing a crisis. You are witnessing a fundamental collapse. To understand why our society is collapsing, you must first understand that civilization is a heat machine. Every human interaction, every piece of data processed, every mile traveled generates heat, entropy. In the language of physics, a civilization is a system that maintains order by importing energy and exporting chaos. As long as the intake of energy is greater than the generation of entropy, the system grows. We build more, we connect more, we innovate more, but there is a ceiling. As systems grow in complexity, the cost of order increases exponentially. Think of a simple village. It requires very little energy to maintain. Think of a global network of 8 billion people. It requires massive, continuous flows of energy to keep the lights on, the data flowing, and the food moving. This is the entropy trap. To maintain a complex system, you need more energy. But as you use more energy, you generate more heat, more waste, more friction, more complexity. We have reached the point where the energy required to maintain the current level of complexity exceeds the surplus energy available to the system. We are literally spending more energy to fix the system than the system produces. This is not a recession. This is a thermodynamic limit. When a system hits this limit, it enters the phase of fragility. Every slight disruption, a supply chain failure, a geopolitical shift, a climate event, triggers a cascade of failures. Because the system is so interconnected, it can no longer localize its problems. A bug in one corner of the globe is no longer a localized issue. It is a system-wide threat. We are witnessing this right now. Look at our supply chains, our financial derivatives, our social media algorithms. They are all hyper-specialized, hyper-complex, and hyper-fragile. The entropy engine ensures that complexity is inherently unstable. If you look at the history of civilizations, they all follow a predictable arc: expansion, complexity, overextension, and collapse. We are in the overextension phase. We have optimized for efficiency, but in doing so, we have removed all redundancy. We have created a just-in-time world, but nature is a just-in-case reality. We have removed the buffers, we have ignored the waste, and we have blinded ourselves to the rising heat. Every day, the system works harder to maintain the illusion of order, consuming the very resources it needs to build a future. It is a suicide pact disguised as progress. And the scariest part? The system knows. It knows it's over-leveraged, so it accelerates. It tries to innovate its way out, which only creates more complexity, which only generates more entropy. It is the perfect death spiral. The primary defense mechanism of a collapsing system is not to fix itself, but to increase its complexity in a desperate bid to maintain the illusion of control. We call this bureaucratic paralysis. As the entropy engine accelerates, the central authority, be it the government, the corporation, or the central bank, perceives the rising chaos as a lack of regulation. Their immediate response is to add more rules, more oversight, more subcommittees, and more data-gathering processes. They believe that by increasing the complexity of the operating system, they can suppress the entropy that is naturally accumulating in the background. This is the central paradox of late-stage collapse. The more the system breaks, the more governance it requires. And the more governance it requires, the more energy it consumes. We have reached a point where the administrative layer of civilization has become an apex predator, consuming the very resources meant to maintain the core functionality of society. Consider the modern corporation. It spends more time on internal compliance, HR restructuring, and software integration than it does on product innovation. Consider the modern state. It spends more time managing internal political friction and monitoring the citizenry than it does on infrastructure or public welfare. This is what Joseph Tainter famously termed the collapse of complex societies. He argued that as societies become more complex, the marginal returns on complexity decrease. Eventually, you reach a point where you must invest more energy into the system just to keep it from falling apart, with zero net gain in actual stability or well-being. We are currently in the negative marginal return phase of global civilization. Every new regulation, every new emergency spending package, every new digital surveillance tool is an attempt to hold back the tide of entropy with a paper cup. This bureaucracy creates a false order. It makes the system look stable on the surface, but it hollows out the structural integrity of the base. When an organization is more focused on its own survival than on its output, it has already ceased to function as a productive entity. It has become a parasitic structure. The illusion of control is maintained by a constant stream of performance metrics. We measure everything. We analyze everything. We report everything. But these metrics are the dashboard of a car with no engine. The dials look perfect, but the vehicle is rolling backward down a hill. The danger of this paralysis is that it prevents the system from resetting. If the system were allowed to fail naturally in small, controlled doses, it might reorganize itself into something more resilient. But by imposing rigid, top-down control to prevent failure at all costs, we are ensuring that when the system finally breaks, and it won't break in pieces. It will shatter completely. The rigid structure of the modern bureaucracy cannot bend to the forces of entropy. It can only resist until it snaps. We are witnessing the solidification of failure. The leaders, the managers, and the technocrats are terrified of the chaos, so they do the only thing they know how to do. They tighten the leash. But the leash is what is choking the life out of the civilization. We are becoming a governance-heavy society. We prioritize the process of decision-making over the quality of the decision. We prioritize the documentation of safety over the actual attainment of safety. This administrative rot is the biological equivalent of an autoimmune disease, where the defense mechanisms of the body begin to attack the healthy tissues because they have lost the ability to distinguish between self and threat. The system views any form of self-organizing autonomy as a threat to its order, and so it crushes the very creativity and adaptability it needs to survive. The entropy engine thrives on this. It loves bureaucracy. It loves the paperwork. It loves the endless circular meetings. It loves the gridlock, because gridlock is the purest form of entropy. It is the state where energy is expended, but no work is done. We have established that the current level of complexity is unsustainable. The entropy engine is demanding payment. What comes next? It is the most terrifying and yet the most inevitable phase of history, the Great Decomplexification. This is not a choice made by policymakers. It is a physical necessity dictated by the universe. When a system can no longer support its own weight, gravity takes over. The structures, financial, political, social, that we have built to maintain our current standard of life will be stripped away, layer by layer, until the system returns to a level of complexity that can be sustained by the energy available. This process of decomplexification is often mistaken for apocalypse, but in thermodynamic terms, it is simply a state change. It is the system shedding its excess heat. The assets that are most dependent on the high-energy, high-complexity state will disappear first. Global supply chains will localize. Financial derivatives will vanish. The illusion of infinite, instantaneous access to everything will dissolve. We are moving from a world of hyper-connection back to a world of hyper-locality. This sounds primitive to our modern ears, but it is actually the most rational, energy-efficient survival strategy a society can employ. The great decomplexification will be violent because our entire identity is tied to the current complexity. We define ourselves by what we own, who we are connected to, and what we can access. When those things are removed, the resulting identity crisis will be the true catalyst for the collapse. People will cling to the old systems long after they have ceased to provide value. They will protest. They will demand government intervention. They will look for someone to blame. But you cannot blame the second law of thermodynamics. You cannot protest against the exhaustion of resources. The system will simplify whether we want it to or not. The decomplexification will happen in 3 distinct phases. First, the financial strip back, where the imaginary wealth created by complex financial engineering will be wiped out. Second, the infrastructure contraction, where the cost of maintaining massive interconnected systems will become too high, leading to the decay of long-range transport, high-speed energy grids, and massive urban centers. Third, the social localization, where individuals will be forced to rely on their immediate community, their families, their neighbors, their local ecosystems to survive. The people who will survive the great decomplexification are those who have already begun to simplify their own lives. They are the ones who have built their own resilience, who have learned to produce their own food, who have fostered local communities, and who have reduced their dependence on the centralized systems. We are essentially witnessing the end of the globalist era, an experiment that lasted roughly 1 human lifespan and assumed that energy would always be cheap, abundant, and infinite. We now know that this assumption was the greatest error of the 21st century. This isn't to say that humanity will return to the Stone Age. We will keep the knowledge, but we will lose the scale. We will lose the ability to maintain the globalized, super complex bureaucracy that we have today. And honestly, this might be the only way to save the species. By stripping away the administrative layers that have paralyzed our innovation and by reducing our dependence on fragile global networks, we may actually find a path to a more stable, albeit smaller, existence. We are not just watching the system die. We are watching a massive, global pruning. The entropy engine is trimming the dead branches of civilization. It is an ugly process, it is a painful process, but it is a necessary process. The era of the mega system is drawing to a close. We are heading toward a world of human-scale systems. A world where the distance between the producer and the consumer is shorter. A world where the consequences of our actions are immediate and visible. A world where complexity is no longer the metric of progress, but resilience is. We are moving from an age of extraction to an age of maintenance. This will change everything. Our politics, our daily routines, our sense of purpose. We will have to learn how to live within our energy budget again. And for those who have spent their lives in the illusion of infinite growth, this will feel like a nightmare. But for those who have seen the entropy engine for what it is, this is the first step toward a reality that actually makes sense. We are living in the age of the efficiency paradox. For decades, we have been told that globalization, lean manufacturing, and hyperconnectivity are the pillars of human advancement. We have optimized our world for maximum output, minimum waste, and instantaneous supply. We call this resilience, but it is in fact the exact opposite. True resilience requires redundancy, extra capacity, local stockpiles, diversified systems, and the ability to operate in isolation. What we have built is a fragile global monolith that cannot survive the slightest breeze of turbulence. The entropy engine thrives on this fragility. By removing all slack from the system, we have created a reality where a single port closure in Asia, a drought in a major agricultural hub, or a cyber attack on a central data node can bring the entire edifice to its knees. We have replaced the just-in-case reality of our ancestors with the just-in-time delusion. We assume the system will always be there, that the shelves will always be stocked, and that the data will always flow. But the system is not a static object. It is a precarious balancing act of billions of moving parts that require constant, high-energy input. When that input fluctuates, the balance fails. Consider the complexity of a modern smartphone. It contains minerals sourced from 20 different countries, processed in 5, assembled in 1, and sold globally. The supply chain for this single device is more complex than the entire logistical network of the Roman Empire. If one link in this chain breaks, due to war, resource scarcity, or bureaucratic collapse, the entire supply chain collapses. We are fundamentally dependent on a web of interdependencies that we do not fully understand and cannot fully control. This is the ultimate entropy trap. We have outpaced our ability to manage our own tools. The illusion of resilience is reinforced by our financial models. We count GDP as a measure of progress, but GDP only measures the velocity of money, the movement of resources. It does not measure the health or longevity of the system. In fact, in an entropic collapse, GDP can temporarily increase as we burn through our remaining capital to stave off the end. We are eating our own furniture to keep the fireplace going. The markets view this as activity, but the thermodynamic reality is that we are accelerating our own decay. Furthermore, our obsession with high-tech solutions is a form of cognitive dissonance. We believe that if a system is failing, we simply need a better algorithm, a faster server, or a more advanced AI to patch the holes. But technology is not a replacement for fundamental stability, it is an amplifier. When applied to a failing system, technology only speeds up the failure. We are currently trying to patch a global civilization that is fundamentally suffering from an energy deficit by using more technology, which requires even more energy. It is a vicious cycle. We are putting more efficiency into a system that is already over-optimized to the point of brittleness. The fragile nature of this system means that the collapse won't happen as a single Hollywood-style explosion. It is happening right now in the form of soft failures. It is the slow degradation of infrastructure, the creeping loss of institutional trust, the rising cost of living, and the increasing frequency of unforeseen global crises. These are the tremors before the quake. The entropy engine is shaking the foundations of the global monolith. And because we have built everything on top of this monolith, we have nowhere to hide when it begins to crack. We have traded the hard, local, and tangible reality of survival for a soft, global, and virtual one. And when the virtual world eventually disconnects from the physical one, we will find ourselves utterly unprepared for the world that remains. We are the most technologically advanced generation in history, but we are also the most vulnerable. We have forgotten how to live without the global support system, and that forgetting is our greatest liability. If the global monolith is doomed, what remains? The final part of our audit leads us to human-scale survival. We must consciously decouple from the entropy engine. This does not mean running into the woods to become a hermit. It means rebuilding our lives on the scale where physical, social, and economic feedback loops are direct, immediate, and manageable. We must shift our focus from optimization to resilience. Resilience is not a mathematical value. It is a biological state. It is the ability to withstand, absorb, and recover from shocks. In the human-scale economy, wealth is not measured in abstract currency, but in stored energy, food, water, fuel, skills, and community capital. These are the only things that will hold value when the entropy engine completes its cycle. We have spent centuries outsourcing our survival to global systems. We now have to bring it back home. This requires a radical shift in our daily routine. We need to focus on the 3 pillars of terrestrial survival: local food, local energy, and local governance. Why local? Because entropy acts on distance. The further away a resource is, the more energy is lost in transporting it, and the more vulnerable the chain is to disruption. When you produce your food locally, the entropy cost is minimal. When you rely on a global food chain, the entropy cost is catastrophic. We must also rethink our definition of community. In a high-complexity society, a neighbor is just someone who lives next to you. In a human-scale society, a neighbor is a critical node in your survival network. This is not just about nostalgia, it is about thermodynamics. A community that shares tools, skills, and resources reduces the total entropy of the group. It is the most efficient thermodynamic structure for human existence. We must move away from the individualistic consumer model, which maximizes consumption, and move toward the community-resilient model, which maximizes survival. Reclaiming the terrestrial also means re-embracing hard reality. The entropy engine feeds on our desire to stay in the virtual, the abstract, and the intangible. To break its grip, we must engage with the material world. We must learn to fix things. We must learn how things grow. We must learn how to build shelter. These are not hobbies. These are the essential survival skills of the post-collapse human. We have spent too long being users of the system, and not enough time being makers of our lives. The human scale transition is the ultimate act of defiance. It says, I will not participate in the accelerated decay of the global system. It is a quiet, deliberate withdrawal. You don't need a revolution to do this. You just need to start shifting your energy. Every hour spent working for the global system is an hour spent feeding the entropy engine. Every hour spent building something real, helping a neighbor, or learning a practical skill is an hour spent feeding your own resilience. This transition will be the most difficult challenge of our lives because it requires us to kill the ego of efficiency. We are addicted to the convenience of the global system. But we must realize that convenience is the sugar that fuels the decay. It is cheap energy, but it comes at the cost of our future. We must learn to find satisfaction in the hard way. We must learn that the effort of growing a tomato or fixing a bicycle is not wasteful. It is the only way to avoid the greater waste of systemic collapse. As the global monolith fractures, the survivors will not be the people with the most virtual assets or the most impressive global connections. They will be the people who have anchored themselves to the earth. They will be the people who have mastered the art of being human in a world that tried to turn them into machines. We are entering the age of the practical human. The age where character, skill, and community matter more than credentials, connections, and capital. This is not a retreat, it is a recalibration. We are finally coming back down to earth. And that is where, for the first time in centuries, we might actually be safe.